I'm Rob.
I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. And this is week 4 of our Westerns theme month. And for week 4, we decided to do a classic non-John Wayne Western. So in trying to narrow this down, we ended up deciding to do something that had a... Well, I guess it wasn't necessarily a concerted effort to have something that had a modern remake, right?
No.
But we ended up deciding on the 1957 3:10 to Yuma, starring Glenn Ford and Van Heflin. Also Felicia Farr and Leora Dana and Henry Jones. But yeah, so we decided on 3:10 to Yuma, which does have a modern remake as a coincidence.
From 2007, which we will probably talk about briefly, but will not be the
It's not going to be the focus of this podcast, but it will come up, which is why I mentioned it. So... yeah, when was the first time you saw this?
You had encouraged me to see this. I forget how far back this goes, but the idea of me watching both versions and then writing a review had been floated by you years before I actually got around to doing it, which was in 2014.
Okay. Yeah, so for me it was in preparation for the 2007 version coming out. I saw the trailers for it and I was intrigued, but I also knew it was a remake. And so I made a point of watching this one before I watched the new one. And I think it was also a like fortune of circumstance thing. Like it was getting ready to come out and I happened to see it on like AMC or TCM, something like that. And so because it was on, I took advantage and watched it before I watched the new 3:10 to Yuma. So the first time I saw this was probably in 2007 anyway. I don't remember what month the new one came out, but yeah. So it was also probably in 2007. I rather like this.
This is a great movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of an unsung great Western.
Yeah, for sure. Glenn Ford is a great actor. In fact, kind of a little bit of a tangent, but do you recall what the first movie you recall seeing Glenn Ford in was?
Well, it would probably have been Superman.
Yep.
Because he is Pa Kent.
For me, that's for sure the first movie I saw him in.
There's a great Easter egg in Superman Returns, the aborted reboot from 2006, where Superman's contacting his mother. It's played by Eva Marie Saint.
Okay.
And on the mantelpiece is a picture of Glenn Ford.
Nice.
That's implying continuity with the earlier films.
Yeah.
Glenn Ford's a great actor. He's a very good actor. He's not, he never won an Oscar to my memory. But he was consistently good. He's had, he was in Gilda, which is probably best known non-Western film. He was in The Big Heat, which is a good kind of noirish film from the early 50s. He was in the 1960s version of The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And then, of course, he was in Superman and many other films. He was born in 1916, died in 2006. I remember when he passed away being kind of surprised he was still alive.
Yeah. Especially someone from that era with all the smoking and everything.
Yeah, he was also in a great Western that this kind of reminded me of that I need to revisit because I haven't seen it in like 15 years, called Texas, which is him and William Holden are on a cattle drive, and then they split up, and then I think they end up on like different sides of a dispute. I think one of them gets involved. It's been so long since I've seen it, but I remember they were good friends and they have to kind of oppose each other, which has certain tonal similarities to this film.
Yeah. What are your recollections from your first watching of this?
Well, I reread my review of it, and I was really ecstatic about it. And I remember that I was really, really impressed with it. And it is more impressive than the 2007 remake. And you know that I tend to favor an earlier version of a story, just almost, that's the rule. Like, if I don't, that's kind of unusual. This case, it's really deserved.
Yeah.
Like, the 2007 version is good, but it's not as good. It certainly opens things up. It expands. It's like better than 30 minutes longer than this film is. Those expansions were good, but they weren't necessary. I like how tight this film is, how efficient it is. It feels like you're watching a really good paperback Western. And of course, this comes from a story written by Elmore Leonard.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. So
Wow.
Elmore Leonard had a very long career writing pulp fiction. when he started, Westerns were the thing. And so he wrote Westerns for the first 20 some odd years of his career. And then when Westerns started to die out, he switched over to more contemporary crime drama.
Huh.
And of course, we know him probably principally from Justified, but a lot of his books and stories have been made in movies.
I've actually read several of his books. I rather enjoy his books. They're a little bit tougher to find as an audiobook from a public library, but they're quite enjoyable. I think the most recent one I read from him was called Djibouti, and that was fun. But yeah, I didn't realize this was written by, based on something by Elmore Leonard, but yeah.
It'd be interesting to track down and read the short story.
Yeah.
To see which of the two it's more similar to.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you recently rewatched the newer version,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are I remembered there being differences in the ending.
Yes, there's quite a few differences in the ending.
Okay.
And there's also that big segment about the train construction with the Chinese in the middle of the film, and then there's a lot more at the beginning, kind of setting up the situation of Dan Evans, who in this film is played by Van Heflin, but was played by Christian Bale, I would say, in the 2007 movie, and then Glenn Ford's part was played by Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
It's kind of more of a beep in the 2007 remake than he is in this one.
Indeed. What I recall of my impressions of comparing the two is that I actually liked the first, probably 2/3 of the new one better, but I appreciated the ending of this one significantly more, and to the extent that this is a far superior movie.
Well, I think that they changed the ending in the remake. I'd be shocked if the ending of the remake is the same ending as the original short story.
Yeah.
But I understand that you want to set things apart and you want to do something different, a little unexpected, especially if people may be familiar with the earlier work. It's a downer.
Yeah.
It's got a couple shifts really late. There's multiple kind of twists towards the end, but it does not end in a happy place. Whereas this original film has a beautiful ending that, even though it's cheesy, transcends the cheesiness of it. That where the rain comes just as they get him on the train. We haven't really talked about the basic story.
No. The basic story is a broke small-time rancher, Dan Evans, is hired by the owner of the stagecoach.
Butterfield line.
Yeah, Mr. Butterfield, played by Robert Earnhardt. He's hired by Mr. Butterfield to help capture big-time outlaw leader Ben Wade, and then there's a complicated plot in order to get him on the 310 to Yuma from Contention City.
Yeah, which is where the territorial prison is.
Yeah, and the plot of getting him to the train involves hiding Ben Wade at Dan Evans' home, for a period of time, and then,
and get him to the city and put him in a hotel.
Yeah.
While they wait for the
But
train.
Ben Wayne's gang has developed a plan and strategy that if their people are captured, the way that they're going to split up to cover the different cities in order to try and break their people free. And so they're able to intercept Ben Wade and Dan Evans and get people there to try and stop him being put on the train.
And then there's a very early sequence where the reason Dan Evans becomes involved is him and his boys are out looking for the cattle that have run away, and they see the stagecoach robbery, and they kind of dragoon Evans into helping to apprehend Wade, who has stayed in Brisbane to flirt and implied relations with the local barkeep lady,
whose name is Emmy and played by Felicia Farr.
Felicia Farr is the second Mrs. Jack Lemmon.
Yeah.
And there's that wonderful sequence where he comes into the bar and distracts him by saying, "You owe me money for the time you wasted when I was trying to get the cattle back." And they kind of have this back and forth where he keeps paying. It's like $2 more. How about $2 more for each of your children because I wasted their day?
Well, but the funny part is, Ben Wade is actually kind of being nice while at the same time being facetious in that scene. He's like, "Well, how much do you get when you how much is your time worth?" And he says, "Well, I get $2 when I work for the day." And he says, "Well, I wasted half your day. Here's the $2 anyway." And then, they could be settled at that, but then it's the Ben Wade character who's like, "Here's $2 more for your boys' time, and then here's $2 more for
scaring your cattle."
And
and then he says,
"How about $2 more because my cattle are tired?"
Yeah. Well, and then it's like, "Is there anything more you want to be paid for?" It's like, "Yeah, you could pay me $2 more for making me nervous."
Yeah, yeah. which is funny.
These are really pretty interesting characters.
Well, and it's implied that part of the reason that Dan Evans is doing what he's doing is because his boys basically called him a coward.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't interfere with the stagecoach robbery, which he couldn't have done anything. And then he didn't want to go out, and go round up a posse or go after him or anything like that. He gives up their horses without fighting, and his boys basically call him a coward. And so he's trying to both impress his boys and say, look, you don't have to be a coward while doing what's smart, and at the same time proving that he's not a coward. And then it also is about the principle of you just can't get away with this stuff and be free willy-nilly. And
that becomes more what it's about for him the longer the process goes on. But it starts out a little more base.
Especially after Potter dies.
Yeah. So,
but Butterfield offers $200, which is the amount he needs to get water rights for 6 months.
Yes, that's the other thing. And they go into it in a lot more detail in the remake, just how distraught. This family's not in a good place. They are really on the verge of losing everything. And Van Heflin does a great job because he is, at the beginning of the film, such a beaten man.
Yeah.
And he's always been an actor that's good at being on edge and kind of on the tip of this wire. And probably the part that comes to mind for him is he played the bomber in the 1970 film Airport, who is thinking about bombing this plane because he's in bad economic situation and his wife will get the insurance.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite the film. He's good at this kind of part. And just the way he grows and the way his motivations are complicated and they kind of shift. And the moment that Butterfield talks about, I'll pay $200, he's just kind of there in the background. He overhears it and like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Like, no thinking. It's like instant. It's like, this is, there's a risk, but this could save me.
Well, and the only other person who wants to volunteer for the job is Potter, who's the town drunk.
Yeah.
And at one point, basically, he says, you got to give me a chance. Basically, this is my only chance of ever straightening out my life. And they only allow him to take the chance because no one else will volunteer to do it.
He's kind of great because he has quite the arc, too.
Well, and he has a total change towards the end. He has multiple opportunities to drink at the end of the film and actually genuinely turns them down.
He has that great line where he's been out scouting around and Butterfield's thinking he might have been out drinking. He's like, oh, did you go out and get a drink? He's like, no, this is the only time in my life I don't want to drink.
Yeah, Potter was good. That's played by Henry Jones.
Should talk a little bit about the director, Delmer Davis, who, working director. He had a long career. There's a few films in his catalog that jump out to me. One is The Red House, which is a mystery from 1947. Edward G. Robinson in it. One of the reasons I know it is the lead character's name is Nathaniel, which my name and is not particularly common in films. And somehow I think my grandma made me familiar with this film.
Yeah. And
then there was a film in 1950 called Broken Arrow with Jimmy Stewart and Jeff Chandler about Cochise and the Indians in Arizona. He directed A Summer Place in 1959, which was a big hit. Its theme song is pretty well known. And those are kind of the standouts in Delmer Davis's career. Speaking of theme songs, this movie has quite the theme song. Three Ted to Yuma, a ballad sung by Frankie Lane.
Yeah.
And that music is incorporated almost too much in the score. After a while, it kind of gets like, okay, you can cool it. But that's mostly in the first half of the film, and then it dies down in the second half, and I think it has a reprise at the very end.
It does.
But it's pretty good. It's very period Western.
Yeah. I found a little tidbit about that. The theme song sung by Frankie Lane, as you mentioned. Frankie Lane was well known for singing theme songs to Westerns and for having such sincerity in his voice when doing so. And it was because of his very familiar contributions to Westerns that Mel Brooks chose Lane to sing the theme for Blazing Saddles in 1974.
Fun.
The inside joke was that Lane sang his heart out, never realizing that the lyrics were a spoof.
Oh.
So, one other little tidbit on this. In 2012, this film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So, similar to Saving Private Ryan.
Mm.
Yeah. One other thing about this, and we kind of talked about this while we were watching it briefly at the very beginning, most westerns at this point were actually being filmed in color. But Delmer Davies and Charles Lawton opted to shoot this in black and white. And in addition to shooting it in black and white, they used red filters on the lenses to give the landscape an even more starky, parched look to better the film's story of being in a lengthy drought.
Yeah.
So, and it is effective as a black and white.
Yeah, it's a good-looking film. I would not have wanted this in color, and something that became kind of an unwritten rule in the transition period, which lasted decades between color and black and white, is you do your more serious films in black and white.
Yeah.
It also helps budgetarily. It's not as expensive, but it was viewed as adding a certain level of gravity to the film, which I really think is the right choice here. If this film was in color, I think I'd still want to watch it black and white.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. There's something about this just being in black and white that added to it.
Also the shadows. It makes good use of shadows in the film, which would not have been as effective in color.
Yeah. I appreciated the color in the new one, but in this one I think I would struggle to imagine seeing this as a color film and having it be as moving.
And we should talk a little bit more about Glenn Ford's character, about Wade.
Uh-huh.
He's really interesting. He's really complicated. So
he gets complicated towards the end. Most of the movie he seems fairly straightforward and simple, at least to me.
Yeah.
So expound.
Well, where he's flirting with Felicia Farr at the bar, and you have the feeling like this is what he does and he's good at it, but maybe he wouldn't do it if he could start over again.
Maybe. I mean, I see what your point on that. One of the things
he's
that's
kind of
interesting,
a wistful bad guy, and he keeps commenting to Dan Evans how he kind of wishes he had his life. It's like, I wish I had a wife, but I'd treat my wife better and get it more, which is unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, because you would steal it.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me about the Ben Wade character is how he's always talking about his women in other towns. Even with Felicia Farr at the bar, he's like, oh, where are you from? Oh, I knew a girl from this place, the blah, 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 and then he's talking to Alice Evans, played by Leora Dana, and he's like, oh, I knew a lady from San Francisco, and her dad was a boat captain too, and she had these pretty green eyes, and
Talks about eyes a lot.
Yeah, yep. So it's interesting that to have that dichotomy, but then as they're waiting at the hotel in Contention City, he just keeps upping the amount of money that he offers Dan Evans to let him go, which seems again stereotypical and straightforward. The only point at which he really seems to have character arc and develop anything is right at the ending as they're making their way to the train, and he seems like he genuinely doesn't want Dan Evans to die.
Yeah.
He doesn't want his guys to kill him.
They do become... He gets really won over to Dan Evans. Like, he admires him. And that ultimately is pivotal at the very end, where they have very little chance of making it to this train because so many of Ben Wade's fellows, his gang, are there, and the train's pulling out of the station, and he says, well, we're going to jump on 2 or whatever. And he's like, how can I trust that you're just going to have to trust me? And he does jump onto the train that's taking him to prison.
Yeah.
And then they have that great little conversation where he says, well, I've been to Yuma prison before.
I already broke out of Yuma. Yeah.
So all this effort, and it's still like, this is an inconvenience.
Yeah, but the whole plot also only exists because of his giving into his carnal desires in Bigsby, and...
Yeah, there's that certain casualness that he did risk what he risked, being completely confident that he'd get away with it. It's like, my gang's going to, even if they did get me, they're going to come back and rescue me. I'm not seriously concerned. Yeah. And even when he, is on the way to prison, he's still not seriously concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fun film. It's an enjoyable film.
It's got a wonderful
particularly
tension.
Long either.
Yeah.
92 minutes is all it is.
It's very tight.
Yeah. What else do you have to add about this? What else do you want to say about the comparison between this and the new one?
One other big thing is how the central relationship among Dan Evans and his family in the first film is the oldest son. It's played by the same Logan Lerman who was our Charlie in The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the big relationship, and Logan Lerman's there at the end, when they're in Contention City and trying to get to the train. And in this film, it's the wife. And there's more solo scenes between him and the wife, and that relationship is stressed. And this is another example of where, when they made the remake, they wanted to change it. You have to change some things. I think they both work about the same. When she comes riding into town at the end, it's don't do that.
Yeah.
No, don't do that. But yeah, this is a great story. I love the arcs in it. I love the relationship between Glenn Ford and Van Heflin. I love the tension of those talks they have on the trail, and especially in the hotel room.
Yeah, just the two of them sitting in the hotel room.
It's got a great energy to it, and I keep going back to the word tension. The film that this probably reminds me of the most is High Noon.
Yeah.
Which is structurally very similar. And the last...
And also done by...
half hour or so of the film is pretty close to real time. Wasn't that also done by Not Delmer? The same director, no.
In the trivia, there was a connection to High Noon, and I was confused by that. But it says, this film, along with the equally allegorical High Noon, was a deciding factor for Howard Hawks deciding to make Rio Bravo a return to more optimistic, less revisionist westerns.
High Noon was directed by Fred Zinnemann.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry for the interruption.
Right.
What about comparisons to the new one? You also rewatched that.
Mm.
Anything else you want to say about the comparison?
Yeah, just that, it expands it. It's grittier.
The new one isn't a terrible movie.
No, it's a good movie. I would give it 3.5 stars.
Really?
Yeah, it's good, and there's differences in the character. I think Van Heflin gives a better performance in his part, and I think Glenn Ford gives a better performance, but it's a very different performance in the hands of Russell Crowe. He is more of an SOB.
For sure, yeah.
He doesn't have the same kind of twinkle that Glenn Ford has.
That smile.
Yeah, the smile.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this before we give ratings?
I think I've said most of what I have to say about it.
Box office on this, 1957 was a very different time, but the domestic gross on this was just over $4 million. So yeah, let's head into ratings. How would you rate this film?
Well, I would rate this film 4 stars.
Yeah.
And I would give it 9 out of 10.
I think we're perfectly aligned on this one, 4 and 9 for me too.
Yeah, and the reason it's not a 10 is I described it as tight, and it generally is tight. And there are these certain breathing space moments, which the film needs, but sometimes they play out just a little too long, and there's little moments where it could be even tighter. But it really works. As I said early on, this is really an unsung great Western.
Yeah.
This should be part of the great Western canon. It should be better known by itself.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing that holds this back from the 10-star for me is just that little bit cheesiness of the ending. But yeah. That's a very minor critique, given the rest of the nature of this film. You were talking about how tight this film was, and I was reminded of this factoid kind of by our conversation about The Wild Bunch. And we talked a bunch in that one about shot length, and you talked about how tight this is. For this movie, the average shot length is 6.4 seconds, and the median shot length is 6.6 seconds. So most of your shots in this movie are only 6 seconds, and then you're switching. But that
doesn't feel like it.
Well, but again, if you do it correctly, like in The Wild Bunch and in this one, you can do that and have these short sequences and have them work. So 4 and 9 from both of us. I think that's pretty much all we have to say about 3:10 to Yuma.
It's been a fun month, and I guess we need to rank our movies.
Those. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I almost forgot. How would you rank these in order? Westerns: Unforgiven, Hondo, My Name Is Nobody, and 3:10 to Yuma.
I would say that Unforgiven is the best. I would then put this, 3:10 to Yuma. I would then do Hondo, and then My Name Is Nobody.
I'm really torn here because I think I agree with you on Unforgiven and 3:10 to Yuma. And as much as it seems like a sacrilege, I think I might put Hondo in 4th.
Oh.
I think Hondo and My Name Is Nobody, pretty interchangeable in terms of ranking of these 4. But yeah, so. Yeah.
Good month. I'm glad we did this.
This was a
We
fun
should
month.
do more kind of genres.
Yeah. This is our first time like doing like a genre month. We've done, in terms of our theme month, it's different. Your movies are very different, and tenor, there's not that connecting thread between them other than the genre, so it ends up being very different, and it's harder to rank them at the end because of that. So, yeah. Anything else to add on this one?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm Rob.
I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
I did want to say a little bit about the actor Ford Rainey, who played the sheriff of Brisbane.
Oh, yeah?
So Ford Rainey had a very long career. He acted until his death, apparently, in 2005 at the age of 96.
Wow.
So Rainey was a bachelor until he was 46 years old, when he finally married and settled down in New York and had 2 sons and a daughter. They did eventually move back to California. I guess I'm sure it was easier to work out there. He lived in Malibu with his wife. He continued to act, into late life. He had a number of hobbies he enjoyed, such as beekeeping and bird breeding. He died of a stroke on July 25th, 2005. He is interred at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery. And interestingly, in May 2012, Ford's 54-year-old chiropractor son, Robert Rainey, was found murdered in his Los Angeles, California office. The homicide remains unsolved.
Wow.
He was born in Mountain Home, Idaho.
Really?
From Boise.
Yeah. One of his credits that I was totally unaware of, Ford Rainey's.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know he's in Halloween too?
Is he a cop?
His character is Dr. Mixter.
Oh, one of the doctors.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he's got a great look. I mean, he looks like your Western sheriff.
Yeah. I had a thought for the outtakes.
Mm-hmm.
Best Western remake. Seems like it might be a cop-out, though.
Well, the one that we've talked about a lot over the years is
True Grit.
True Grit. Those, the original John Wayne and then the Coen Brothers film, are really close to equal. Like, I don't think I could say one is better than the other. They're their own thing, and they both really work.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of a, forget just a Western remake, but a remake in general that works better than that, than True Grit. I can't think of a remake that works better than that. And I was very skeptical of that remake going into it, because how do you remake it?
Yeah.
Such an iconic John Wayne.
Yeah, exactly. It seemed like kind of foolhardy thing for the Coens to attempt. But they weren't remaking that. They were remaking the book.
Yeah.
Which I need to read at some point. I mean, it resulted in 2 really excellent films, so it's probably worth reading. And you wonder what is in it that hasn't made it into either version.
Yeah. I think I have read that one once, and it's pretty close to the second one. I'll have to double check my Goodreads later, so.
Glug. Trailers from Hell is a YouTube channel that's fun.
Is it?
Yeah, they play old trailers, and they have usually people in the film industry, kind of narrate a very brief audio commentary over the trailer and tell you about the film. They tend to do a lot of cheesy exploitation films.
Yeah.
But they do
trailers of cheesy exploitation films. Wow.
I would recommend this channel. They're all trailer-like.
And it's called what again?
Trailers from Hell.
Okay. I'll have to look it up.
I am trying to remember what they are.
Let me tell you, and I will edit this out after the fact so we look smarter than this. And that smarter than this comment will end up in the outtakes.